Welcome to another video in the series, the map to Adobe Lightroom Classic. Today, this video will discuss another one of the local adjustment tools. This one will be called the Radial Filter. I'm going to walk through why we're going to use it and how we're going to use it first. So we're going to look at this photo of this poppy pod. And what I would like to do in this photo is draw more attention to the pod itself by darkening and muting the colors in the background. In previous video, we've talked about the adjustment brush where I could paint with exposure out here and maybe desaturation a little bit. But that takes some time. Brushing manually, brush, takes a moment. So I want to be faster than that. And the Radial Filter will help me do that much more quickly. So the Radial Filter, once you're in the Develop module, it's in the toolbar below the histogram. It's the second tool from the right. It's a circle with a dot in the middle of it. So click it once, and that'll activate the tool. As is my custom, I always double-click the word Effect to reset all the controls from where I was last time. And what I want to do with this one is make it darker outside the area I'm going to define. So the way I do that is by decreasing my exposure. When I'm not sure what I want to do, I go right around -1 or so, maybe just a little less than that, or plus a little less than 1, just to get me started. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to draw an ellipse. The Radial Filter is round. It's an oval shape to circle, so it can be kind of a flat, skinny thing, to a very perfect circle if you wanted to. The way it works is it draws a circle, an ellipse from the center of the plus sign that you click. So I'm going to click about here in the middle of the poppy pod, click, I'm going to hold, and I'm going to drag. And you can see anything outside of this area now got darker. So I'm going to reposition this a little bit by clicking on the control point in the middle, the pin. I'm going to resize this a little. When you grab one of the control points, it will also move the opposite control point in the opposite direction, the same amount. So now I have this area here inside the ellipse is protected. It's the same as it was when we started, and then outside is now getting the change. So it's darker. I'm going to also take down, reduce the saturation out there. So I don't want to go black and white, but I do want to go to less saturation. Might do a little less contrast out there as well. So I'm going to turn on the overlay so you can see what's being changed. Anything that's covered in the red is the part that's being changed, and you'll see that in the center here it's white. There's no red, but then it gradually, changes to the red. So there's a feather on this tool, and it's a number from 0 to 50, and 50 is 0 to 100. And 50 is in the middle, and that's generally where I leave it. I might, on this one, adjust it outward. Can I do it after the fact? I don't know. I don't think I can change the feather after I draw it. Oh, yes, I can. So feather at 100, feather to 0. A 0 feather means it has a hard edge, and the brush ends, the Radial Filter, ends exactly where you tell it to. Unfortunately, that looks a little fake. That's a little too much. So we'll go maybe kind of split the difference on this one to about -25 or 30. And that'll soften the edge, but keep it mostly outside of the center of the poppy. So I'll turn the overlay off so we can see what we're doing right now. And now you can see outside of the poppy is darker and less contrast. So I have more attention in the middle where I want it on the poppy. So let's just turn off the Radial Filter completely down here at the bottom of that panel with a toggle switch. So I'll click to turn that off, and we will see in a moment. There we go. That's where we started before the Radial Filter. So very quickly, in just less than a minute probably, you can go from this photo to change it to an edit that looks more like this. So the Radial Filter is really powerful, works really quickly, much faster than an adjustment brush to paint in that outside area. So let's do another photo, show you another use for this tool. So we're going to go to this picture of Natalie on her wedding day, and what I want to do in this photo is I want to put a spotlight, some extra light on her face. So again, with the Radial Filter active, I'm going to double click the word effect to reset all of my controls. I'm going to go to my exposure slider and turn it up a little bit. Not sure how much just yet. And then I'm going to click and draw an area on her face. So I'm going to click and hold, and I'm drawing an area, and it will make her face brighter once my computer catches up. There we go. So it didn't make the face brighter. The face stayed the same, and everything else got brighter. That's because by default, the radial filter works outside the area you draw. So it's changing the area outside. Fortunately, we can change that. We can change the behavior of the radial filter with the invert button down here right below the feather control at the bottom of the radial filter panel. So I'm going to click on invert, and now her face is brighter the way I want it. I'm going to readjust the size here. And let's zoom in a little bit. Command plus on a Mac, Control plus on a PC. Hold down the space bar to get the hand so I can reposition my viewing area a little bit. And just move this around to taste. So her face is brighter as I want it, and actually I'm going to make it a little more oval. I can rotate this by putting my cursor just outside. Her head's at an angle. So I'm going to match that rotation by clicking outside of the area I drew, the radial filter, and then holding, and it will rotate this to a different orientation. One more thing I want to do here, just a little bit, I'm going to take my shadows on her face and just open those a little bit, go to the plus side on shadows, about plus 20. It's just a nice little skin smoothing and without taking a lot of time on a face. So let's zoom back out and turn the filter off at the bottom so we can see really quickly what we did and how quick it is. So I'm going to turn the filter off real quick. Her face will darken up. The sun was behind her, that's why her face is a little dark. But we can quickly adjust exposure with the radial filter. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, it's a little too much. So this is a really great way if you have portrait photos and you have a group of folks. You can have an individual radial filter on each person in the photo, and you can adjust exposure for each person. You can adjust color if you want. All the controls that we have access to in the radial filter are the same ones as we have in the adjustment brush. So we have the temperature, color temperature, the white balance. We have the tone controls, the presence controls with texture, clarity, dehaze, and saturation. Sharpness and such I don't use very much down here. In fact, I've never used noise, moire, and defringe. But they're there if you need them. Also, we can add color if we wanted to. So that's a really quick way to add a little spotlight to a face using the radial filter. All right, so the next image I want to work on is another wedding photo, one we worked on with the adjustment brush. We made the grass greener down here instead of the yellow it was. And I also used spot removal to get rid of some bits and pieces around the photo. So what I'm left with, though, is the couple here, Stephen and Nicole. They're a little dark, so they need a spotlight of their own. So we're going to do that with the radial filter. As always, once the filter's on, I double-click the word effect to reset all my controls from what I was doing last time. I am going to increase the exposure here. When I'm not sure what I'm doing, I just turn it up to about either side of 1 or -1 to get started. I want to make sure that the filter will be inverted. I want the change to happen inside the area I draw, because if I don't click invert, it will change the area outside the area I draw. So I'm going to draw an elliptical oval shape, click, hold, and drag. Get it over them nicely. I'll probably angle it just a little bit, make it just a little wider out here. Make sure I include all their head and as well as the lower part of their bodies, and there we go. So one problem with this, though, as you can see, I'm also increasing the exposure out here and above their heads, over here on the right. Also missing just a teeny bit of her elbow over here. I could adjust that, but then it makes it wider on the other side. So it's all a compromise, but there is, so let me show you the overlay so you can see what's happening. So this is what I don't want. I don't want these areas changed. It's probably easier to show you. Let me quickly turn it off and watch the halo that's going to kind of glow around them on the top and on to the right. So it gets brighter in areas I don't want. So there's a fix for that, a solution inside this tool. And this tool I can brush. So I can basically use the adjustment brush, if you will, inside and add to or take away from the radial filter. So I'm going to turn the brush on, and then I need to scroll down to the bottom of the tool panel, and now I have the brush controls just like we did with adjustment brush. I'm changing to the erase tool because I want to take away from the area. I want to get rid of this and this down here. So I'm going to just click and brush, and you'll see it's darkening back up. So I'm going to make sure I get everything out here. It's not going to hurt if I brush in areas where the radial filter is not in effect. So I'm going to brush there, got rid of that. Let's just make sure there's nothing hanging out here. So really quickly, I've taken away from the brush, the radial filter, excuse me. I do want to make sure I got all of the top of Steven's head and the top of Nicole's head here a little bit. So I'm going to, still with the brush active, change from the erase brush to the A brush, which is a brush that adds to the area. So I'm going to just draw, so you can see I missed, the radial filter missed a little Steven's head, so I don't want him to disappear. Just a little bit of the top of Nicole, a little bit on her arms. I don't want those in shadow to look darker and kind of weird. So I'm just making sure, getting all of them. So I might have been able to do this a little faster, to be honest, with the adjustment brush, but I wanted to be able to show you how to do this with the radial filter. And oftentimes with the radial filter, you might need to add or subtract if the shape you're adding the radial filter to isn't very oval or round. This is a little bit of an irregular shape, so it's quick to just add and subtract from it. And sometimes I like to do the area tools first and then erase or add to them. It just feels like I'm working a little quicker for me. So you might find you work differently. Next up, I'm going to do a landscape photo. I never thought to use the radial filter on a landscape photo until I watched a video from landscape photographer Thomas Heaton, and I'll have a link to him below. So the landscape photo I want to work on is this one down in Seattle, looking towards West Seattle. I made all the adjustments in the basic panel, so I've got and the HSL, so I've got my sky looking pretty good here. But as with most photos, when you protect the sky, the main thing you want people to look at, the foreground might get too dark. I could use an adjustment brush and paint on the rocks here, but it's going to be a little tricky up here. The nice thing is, if you'll notice, this is kind of got an oval shape to it, the rocks. So that lets me, as inspired by Thomas Heaton, as I mentioned earlier, lets me think about using the radial filter for this. Also, I'm going to use 2 radial filters on this image. I'm also going to use one down here in the oval shape. That's the foreground rocks. I'm going to make those darker and pull some attention away from there so that the main point of attention is the rocks here. So we'll start with the radial filter. It's already turned on. I'm going to double click the word effect to reset my controls and confirm that the invert is still active. I want this change to happen inside the area I'm going to specify. So what I want to do for sure, I know I want to increase my exposure on the rocks. How much? I'm not sure. So I'm going to do just a little bit more or less than 1.0. And this tool draws from the middle out, so I'll start kind of here. I'm going to extend beyond the edges because that'll let me have a tool that's kind of a radial area that's relatively flat. And you can see now this is brighter inside. I'm going to pull this down just a little bit to increase the shape so it's affecting a little bit less outside the radial area. My feather's at 50, so a nice soft edge. Put my mouse over so you can see the affected area. There it is. That's pretty much exactly what I want to have affected. So I'm going to turn the contrast up. I'll go a little bit higher again on the exposure to about 1.3 on this image. I'm going to add some texture to that area for attention, a little clarity, dehaze as well. That's going to add some crunch and texture to that stuff. When you my experience is when you add in these areas, you need to add a little exposure to compensate for that. Usually about an additional 0.3 or so if you like the brightness that it was before you added the presence controls. So that's that. I'm feeling pretty good about the way that looks. I'm going to draw a new radial filter down here, and it's just simply a matter of clicking with the tool active, holding, and drawing a new one. And by default, you're in mode that will add a new radial filter. Now, this filter has the controls the same, it inherited, because I did not double-click the word effect. It's got, it's adding exposure, which is not what I want. So let's go back up, as I forgot, and double-click the word effect to reset that area to 0. And now you see it'll get darker, and I want it a little darker than that even. So I'm going to go negative by eyeball until it looks good, negative about 0.5 or 0.6. I'll pull this up just a little bit to get these rocks included right here. You kind of want the edges to disappear. You don't want it to be super obvious where edges are. And here I'm going to reduce the texture a little bit, reduce the clarity, and reduce dehaze, so it'll just pull attention away. Also, this is the one time I'll use some sharpness on the negative side so that it looks a little, it simulates a little bit of shallow depth of field down there. Wait for it to kick in. It's doing a little bit of math on my slow computer. And there we go. So again, let's turn the filter off. Hide the effects of the radial filter, both of them, by turning the filter off. So that's where we started with this image after the basic panel edits and HSL and split toning. So now let's add the radial filters. My rocks are brighter and the logs here, this is a little bit darker. So again, attention. Where do you want people to look? That's what Lightroom can really help you do, is shape the viewer's attention into your photos. The radial filter lets you do it really quickly. It's basically a spotlight. You can make it brighter or darker in the areas you specified. I did both in this photo. You can add color, you can add white balance, you can do all sorts of the controls that are available to you inside the local adjustment tools. So lots of power, still staying in Lightroom and making very dramatic changes to our images for the sake of the people who are viewing our photos, to help them see what I want them to see. The next video in this series will be the graduated filter, another one of the local adjustment tools. So until we meet again, have fun taking photos and enjoy your day.